Welcome, my kindred and kingdom people, to your daily flip, where daily flip of Yah script will always right our ship. Well, we going right back into it. On the last episode, we started talking about and showing you how the Jews, how they tried to infiltrate and secretly bring in people into the faith of Yeshua HaMashiach, to try and sabotage and to bring the believers into slavery. And that slavery is not talking about physical chains, but it's talking about the influence of the scribes and the Pharisees, the chief priests, and the Judaizers. They were seeking to sabotage and to bring the believers and the disciples of Yeshua HaMashiach into this religious slavery and bondage of tradition. So if y'all ready, let's dive right back into it. It's time for us to flip some pages. Let's go to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 2. All of this ties in together. Remember what the scribes and the Pharisees said to Pilate after the crucifixion of Yeshua. They said, man, that if he rose from the dead, that it would be worse off when he was here the first time. So they decided to infiltrate the church and begin to try and sabotage the faith from the inside out. Look here in 2 Timothy chapter 2. This is Paul again talking to his son in the faith, Timothy. He's encouraging Timothy to beware of some things that were taking place and that was going on, just like he was encouraging and talking to the brethren at Galatia. He's talking to Timothy here. Verse 15 says this: do your best to present yourselves to Yah as one approved, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightfully handling the word of truth. Now, if there's a right way to handle it, guess what? There's also a wrong way to handle it. If there's a way that God approves of when it comes to us handling the word of God, then there's a way that he doesn't approve of. We could be handling the word in a way that's not correct. Look at verse 16. Paul says, but avoid irrelevant babble, for it will lead people into more and more ungodliness. Verse 17, and their talk will spread like gangrene. Among them are Hymenaeus and Philetus, who have swayed from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already happened. They are upsetting the faith of some. Verse 19, but Yah's firm foundation stands, bearing this seal: Yah knows those who are his. And let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. So even here, Paul was warning Timothy to rightfully handle the word of truth, to handle it and teach it in a way that Yah approves of. Because he said there were some people that were upsetting the faith of others by teaching things that were false. And this was all done by the hands of the scribes and the Pharisees. They were sending in people to upset, to distract, to disrupt the faith. It says here, Hymenaeus and Philetus. In other passages, I think in 1 Timothy chapter 1, it talks about Hymenaeus and Alexander, another brother who was brought in, who was sent in by the scribes and the Pharisees to upset the faith and to distort the faith. And Paul warned Timothy and Titus and others to beware of these brothers. Why? Because they were sent in by the scribes and the Pharisees to distract and disrupt the faith. Now, let's continue to flip. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. And we're going to start reading at verse 3. And notice here, Paul is not just saying this to one group of people, to one setting of believers, but no, he's going around from Galatia to Corinth. He's talking to Timothy. He's talking to everyone in the faith about the same problem. He's warning them. He's warning all the believers about the same problem that's happening. So look here in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul says, "But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and a pure devotion to Hamashiach." And this was the plan of the scribes and the Pharisees, to lead the believers away from a sincere devotion to Yeshua. They couldn't stop them any other way. They tried persecuting. They tried killing them off. But they could not stop them from following the teachings of Yeshua HaMashiach. So they decided to infiltrate. They decided to secretly sneak in false brothers. Why? To trouble, to distract, to distort, and to lead the followers of Yeshua HaMashiach away from a pure devotion that they had for the faith. Let's continue to read verse 4. Paul says this, "For if someone comes and proclaim another Yeshua than the one we proclaim, or if you receive a different Ruach from the one you received, or if you accept a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it readily enough." Verse 5, "Indeed, I consider that I am not in the least inferior to these super apostles." Paul says he called these people super apostles. Remember, in Galatians, he talked about those that seemed to be influential, but he said, really, they ain't nothing to me. Here, in Corinthians, he's saying the same thing. These quote-unquote super apostles. In other translation, it says chief apostles. And what Paul is doing, he's basically being sarcastic, because there's no such thing as a super apostle or a chief apostle, even though we got people today running around calling themselves chief apostle. Chief apostle this and this. Paul is just being sarcastic here. There's no such thing as a chief apostle. He's making a point. But look what it says here in verse 6. "Even if I am unskilled in speaking, I am not so in knowledge." In other words, Paul said, even if I ain't the best, a motivational speaker, I still know what I'm talking about. That's what Paul is saying here. He said, "Indeed, in every way we have made this plain to you in all things." Now, drop down to verse 13. Look what it says. Paul says, "For such men are false apostles." Who is he saying are false apostles? These super apostles are these chief apostles. That's who he's talking about. He said these men are false. These men are the ones that that the scribes and the Pharisees secretly snuck in to spy out, to distort and distract, to destroy the faith. They are false apostles. He said they are deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of HaMashiach. Look at verse 14. He says, and no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds. In other words, they're going to reap what they sow. This is what Paul is saying here. He's saying these people that were brought in are false apostles. They're not true to the faith. They just are been brought in to distort, to dismantle. The word that we use today would be to deconstruct the faith. But Paul said they are deceitful workers. And they are servants of Satan, who disguises himself as an angel of light. So Paul says there's no wonder that they come in and try to disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. But really, they're deceitful workers, not true believers in the faith. Let's continue to flip. Let's go to 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 4. Just laying this out, just showing you the things that the scribes and the Pharisees, the things that they did to try and hinder, to try and stop the faith. Look here in 1 Timothy chapter 4, starting at verse 1. It says this, and now the Ruach expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. Verse 2, through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and require abstinence from food that Yah created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. See, when we walk in truth, this is why Paul was encouraging the believers in Galatia to follow the gospel that they received in the beginning and to not follow a different teaching, a different spirit, or a different Yeshua, but to follow that which they received from the beginning. Because if they started to follow a different gospel, it would lead them into error and heresy. And Paul says right here that in latter times, in other words, after we're gone, man, people are going to start teaching and preaching things that are not in accordance with the truth, but things that are taught by demons, by Satan himself. Just like we read in 2 Corinthians, that even Satan himself disguises himself as an angel of light. And his followers are going to disguise themselves as those of righteousness. But all the while, they're going to be teaching things straight from the enemy, things that would hinder, things that would distract, things that would lead us into error. And this was the plot of the scribes and the Pharisees, to secretly bring in those that will sabotage the faith, and teach things that would hinder, that would distract, that would shipwreck the faith of the believers. This was their new move. Remember, Yeshua himself says the thief came to do what? To kill, steal, and destroy. And he wanted to destroy the faith. So he sent in these spies. He sent in people that would go in, false brothers, false apostles, to go in and to disrupt the faith. And that's where we're at. So we're going to continue to discuss this as long as the Ruach gives me revelation, knowledge, and understanding. I'm going to take that and I'm going to share that with you guys. The way he usually works with me, he first speaks to me and then he speaks through me. So as he gives me the revelation, knowledge, of wisdom, and understanding, in turn, I take that and I share that with you. So I hope you're getting something out of this. I know I am. And the Ruach is leading us into all truth. So until next time, Ken, Haset, Salom, Barak, Abayah.